All right, welcome back to part two of the video series. Not as strong and not as pretty as I used to be, but I'm working on both right now, if you can believe it. Um, so these are in no specific order. I'm not answering these questions in any sort of like you need to watch part one. If you're like a beginner in any sense, like watch all of them. I'll probably do one after this too. I have a lot of questions here that I'm trying to get through. But it's not like, oh, you have to watch part one in order to watch part two. So I don't care what order you watch them in. Again, just to sort of reiterate, the point of these videos that I'm making right now is primarily just for beginners, people who are just starting off, people who have no idea about fitness. These are specifically questions that I'll get from clients, like their first one or two sessions or their initial consultation or whatever, anything along those lines. These are like the most frequently asked questions that I get asked on a pretty regular basis that pretty much just stuck out in my head that I wanted to cover in terms of videos. Because I think it's beneficial for me to go over this, and I think it's beneficial for maybe somebody watching this to hopefully get something out of it. Again, it depends on sort of what level you're at. And these are going to be generalized questions, and the answers are going to be somewhat generalized. This doesn't apply to everybody. I don't think that I know anything by any standard. But based on studies that I've read and talking to people within the industry whose opinions I trust and watching certain videos and my own experiences and the experiences of other people that I'm somewhat familiar with and can talk about to some degree. So just keep all that in mind. If I'm wrong about something, just comment in the comment section below. Whatever. So first question. What should I get to first? First question always sort of sets the stage. If I was better at editing and just cutting out this silence, here's a good one, and I'll pose it as either a question or a statement. Because people, first one or two sessions. Every time I take someone through, let's say, a program, and I'm setting up a program, and if you've never been in the gym before, and let's say we start off with bench press, and you've never lifted in high school or college, and you don't really know how much weight you can bench press, or you did it in the past and it's sort of like, but I haven't lifted in a couple years or a sort of while. This is applicable to the quarantine especially, but the first couple sessions are always what are your starting numbers? Like I'm looking at your form, I'm giving you a couple critiques, making sure that you're doing things properly, safely, and just like how much weight is comfortable. I said in the last video, one thing Jim Wendler always says is start low or start light and progress slowly. And I 100% believe that, and that's what everybody should do. You start too heavy, you plateau too quickly, you progress too quickly, you plateau too quickly, and then that's where people get frustrated and they're like, I don't know what to do next, and blah blah blah. The slower you progress and the more room you give yourself to adapt to the workouts that you're doing, the more that's going to be long-term progress that you can hold on to for a long time. That being said, first couple sessions are always like kind of easy because you're getting into it, and you might feel sore or you might not feel sore, you might sweat or you might not sweat. It sort of depends on a couple different things, but you usually try and sort of set a bar so that I can write a program around what we do those first couple days, because I need those starting numbers so I get some form of a progression, if that's either adding weight, adding reps, adding sets, like whatever it is, whatever, depending on goals, needs, what I see, what you want to get out of things, etc., etc. But I'll get asked, or I'll get told like, oh, I didn't sweat this workout, and I only get a good workout in if I sweat, or I didn't I didn't get sore. How do I know if it's working if I'm not sore, or like I don't feel like I worked hard enough. You know, I like I'm put I don't feel like I put enough effort into what I was doing, and in a certain respect, some of those markers can be true and untrue depending on to what level you're trying to apply them to. I mean, it's a vague answer, and there's no real correct question. Like, of course, you want to, especially as you get more sort of intermediate advanced territory, you want to be making sure you're working hard. But at the same time, if you're starting off and you're unfamiliar with a lot of lifts and a lot of different things, you want to take your time and make sure that you're doing things correctly. And doing things correctly, if you're lifting half the amount of weight than you think that you can, and you're not sweating, you're not you don't feel like you're working out, but you're doing everything correctly, you're still, one, burning calories, you're still, two, building some muscle, and three, it's going to be safer and a more sort of long-term way of lifting weights. If you start low and you progress slowly, that's going to be something that you can continue to progress for a long time if you do things correctly, as opposed to some people overestimate what they're capable of doing, and then start off strong, and then we got to sort of reel it back in, because it's oh, if you bench pressed 225 for 1 or 2 in college, and you couldn't push past 225 for 10 years, 5-10 years, because you came into the gym, 2 plates is a respectable amount, or so they say, to be able to bench press. So you do 1 or 2 warm-up sets, you slap 2 plates on, and you just go, I haven't gotten anywhere, but I feel good, I feel strong when I lift 2 plates. And it's you got to take all of this into so much consideration. But the fact of the matter is, sweating really has not all that much to do. It depends on what you're doing. If you're doing weights and stuff, when I'm squatting and bench pressing and stuff, I don't sweat that much. I know other people do sometimes. If I'm doing a martial arts or a boxing or something like that, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes that's just your own physiological marker. Sometimes more people sweat more, sometimes people sweat less. I mean, I know people that sweat during the warm-up, and then just it gets progressively worse, and then some people don't, and that it's an individualistic thing. But also at the same time, if you're just beginning, again, these videos are just for beginners. If you're just beginning, you just want to make sure you're doing things correctly, and then everything's gonna eventually fall into place the better you get at everything. But it'd be treat it like any other skill, if you're just starting to if you're shooting guns and you're doing target practice or something like that, and you're oh, well, I want to shoot the gun, and I want to hit the paper target, and the instructor's well, but I gotta show you safety protocols first, right? They don't just go, oh, well, here you go, here's the gun, go ahead. They show you how to take the safety off and how to put the safety on, and to not point the gun at people, and to treat it like it's loaded at all times. And then once you learn all that stuff, then you can go to a range, and then you get better at it. But it takes time, it takes practice. You got to treat lifting weights and diet stuff just like you treat everything else. For some reason, I think maybe it's media, movies, whatever, people get it in their head that, like, oh, you have to look a certain way when you work out, and you have to do this a certain way, or like if I'm not soreness also not necessarily a good metric. I get, despite the fact that I've been like, seriously lifting for 3 years, and like a couple of years here and there in college, and a little sort of in between, but not seriously. But for 3 years, I've been following programs and whatnot, and like getting stronger, adding weight to all of my lifts. I get sore all the time. I'm constantly sore. I don't know how to walk correctly anymore. Um, and a lot of people say that that goes away in time. It could also have to do with like your diet, your protein level. There's different variables, but just know that that's some of these markers that you set for yourself, or that you've heard other people say, like, oh, it's not a good workout unless you sweat, or if you're not sore, you're not working hard enough, or like your perceived level of exertion, is needs to be at this level, and it was at this level, so you didn't do enough, so you need to do more this time. You need to pick a program that works, and you need to follow its progression scheme, because over time, if you're progressing correctly, things are going to get harder, because that's progression of literally anything. Is the better you get at someone, the better you get at something, the harder it becomes. But if you're progressing correctly, even though it's harder, you can still manageably do it. I've had a lot of clients in the past who, I'm not pushing myself enough, so you slap extra weight on. Now all of a sudden they're not doing the exercise correctly, and they're risking injury because they really wanted to push too far in one direction. And as a person who doesn't want to get sued, I don't want you snapping your shit up just because you walked in with like an ego, that, oh, well, I have to be doing this much weight, or I have to be feeling a certain way. And it's like, you need to do things correctly and then build up. And then, once you get to a certain point, it's like, I've gotten through programs like, I did, what's the one? There's one program that's super squats. You can go online, look at it. I think I talked about it in one of my videos, where you take a certain weight that you can do for 10 reps. And this is like the third or fourth program that I sort of ran, and seriously ran in terms of following programs and stuff. You take whatever weight you can do for 10, and you do it for 20, and then you progress. You add 5 to 10 pounds per week. No, you add 5 to 10 pounds per workout for 3 times a week for 6 weeks, so 18 workouts total, and you add like 90, somewhere between 90 to 180 pounds to your 20 rep max. And the program was brutal, but if you're doing it correctly, like it's difficult. I don't remember what the point I was trying to get at. Well, the first couple sessions, it's like, okay, this is hard, but I can do it. The last couple sessions was, if I hadn't squatted 225 for 20, and I hadn't squatted 235 for 20, like, you're not going to be able to hit those numbers later on if you didn't start at a reasonable number for the program. I think I started at like 155 I did for one set of 20. Your body is going to adapt to that, and then the next couple times you keep adding weight. And I mean, to throw, I think, like 250 on your back and squat that for 20 reps is terrible. It hurts a lot, but I mean, the amount of work that I put into, like, especially the last couple of weeks, the last couple workouts, was brutal. And you're talking about one set of 20 reps, so you're like, it's not even that much volume necessarily, right? But to have more than your own body weight on your back for 5 minutes, and to complete 20 squats within like 5, like, the bar is on your back for a long time. But if I hadn't started low enough, if I had started with 225 and I'm like, I'm just gonna squat 225 for 20, I wouldn't have been able to complete 20. I don't know if I would have been able to complete 10 if I just like slapped that weight, like. But yeah, start low, progress slow. Eventually, I mean, I think the reason I bring that example up is because that's an extreme of like, squatting 155 for 20 reps wasn't, it hurt, but it wasn't that bad. But by the time I got done with the program, it was a lot, and you to a certain point, you just got to trust the process that like if you continue to do more, you're going to get more out of it, but you got to make sure that pay your dues and whatnot. That was 15 minutes for one question. God, this is going to be like a 5-part video series. I've plateaued. Now what? That's another good question. What do you do when you plateau? And I feel like this is the reason why a lot of people seek out a personal trainer in the first place, is because they just don't know. They've done a certain thing and it worked for a little while, maybe they did a certain diet and it worked. They lost 30 pounds, or they started doing yoga and it worked, and then whatever, it stopped working, or they did some weights, or they did a cardio class, and at first it was really good, but then you have that stubborn belly fat and whatever. That's when, how to approach this, that there's so many different things, and that's almost where you just need to evaluate every single thing that you're doing, and sometimes the answer is just a shock to your system in terms of like what you're doing and what needs to be done and what could be improved upon. So for example, if you're doing, this is going to be a little bit more specialized of an example than someone who's just, I was running and I run 2 miles a day and I stopped losing weight, what do I do? That's going to be different than the example that I'm setting up, but just sort of follow along the train of thought. So if you're doing starting strength, the beginner program by Mark Riptoe, and you're doing like, I think it's 3 sets of 5 of most exercises, and you're basically just hitting your main lifts, your bench, your deadlift, your squat. Eventually you can toss in like power cleans or rows, or you start adding accessories, chin-ups, curls if you want to, blah blah blah. Eventually it gets to the point where you can't add 5 or 10 or 15 pounds to your lifts anymore. So you gotta start working in a different capacity. One, maybe it might be beneficial for you to do a little bit of a deload, where you drop the weight a little bit more. You probably need to start working in different rep ranges. Maybe you need to change up your like progression scheme or your progression duration, where you're adding 5, 10, 15 pounds per workout. Maybe you need to start adding that per week or per month, or what have you. Or maybe you just need to pick a different program. Maybe you work too long in 5s and you need to do more of like a bodybuilder program where you're doing a lot more hypertrophy work, and then if you come back to strength work, then you start to progress. So that's one example. Another example, I guess, would be diet, where people go on a certain diet for a long duration of time, and then they go, I did keto for however long. I did keto for 3 months and I lost 30 pounds, but it stopped working. I'm not losing any more weight. Like, here's the thing, the better you get at anything, the harder it's going to get, like I just said in the last question. So you'll see, like right now, for instance, where I'm at with like my weight loss. Before quarantine, like around the new year, I was around like 250 pounds, and I was slowly sort of cutting down as much as I could. Before quarantine, I was somewhere between like 230, 235. In the middle of quarantine, I got down to about 215. Now that I started lifting again, I'm like 215 to 220. Maybe I might be pushing upwards of 220 a little bit, but I'm trying to lose so much weight. But as my body fat level progresses from like 22 to 25% to 20 to 22% to 18 to 20% to now I'm looking at doing like 15 to 18%, and then, maybe a body fat level of somewhere between 12 and 15, and maybe eventually 10 and 12 if I can possibly do that. Who knows? If I can stick to it is really the reality of it. But that 10 to 12, the losing 5 pounds in the 10 to 12 range is so much harder than losing 5 to 10 pounds in the 25 to 20 range. I didn't say rep range, did I? 20 to 25 range. It's a lot harder because the more you lose, the more your body sort of adapts and goes like, oh, this is normal, etc., etc. But when you're starting off, you can lose a lot, and then eventually you plateau and things get harder, and that's where just like hard work, consistency, etc., comes in. But sometimes it's not just that. Sometimes maybe you do need to maybe switch things around. Maybe your hormone levels aren't where they need to be. Maybe you have too much cortisol in your system. Maybe you need to take a break from dieting and then come back to it. Maybe you need to do like a refeed period. Maybe you need to do sort of like a steady bulk. Maybe you just need to try a different diet out. Maybe that diet's not working. It worked how it worked, but you need to switch over to something else. It's just, like I said, you get through any basic level of any endeavor. The first couple gains, they're always called like noob gains or whatever the hell. Those are always going to be the easiest. The hard work comes when the noob gains go away and you lost however much weight and you got so strong. And that's where you gotta really start picking things apart and focusing on like what's going to get me to the next stage of what I'm doing, which could be, I need to, what can I do to lift more? Like, do I need more like, I think I basically answered it. Like, you just need to you need to do a sort of assessment and say like, what am I doing now? What can I do differently? And try a couple different things out, and some things might work, some things might not work. It's where you gotta start doing more of your own research, and for some people that's where they start reading more books, or for some people that's where they seek out the help of a professional, like me. I feel disgusting calling myself a professional, but that's where you seek out like a personal trainer who hopefully knows what the fuck they're talking about. Not always the case, but that's, you either seek out help or you try and find the answers yourself. You read certain things, there's different resources, you see what other people did in the same exact scenario, but you just, you can make linear progress for so long before you have to sort of start making some lateral progress and, maybe take 2 steps back before taking 3 steps forward or whatever. But I think that should, I don't know, that's, all of these are going to be sort of vague questions, but yeah, I got like 6 minutes for one more quick one, and then I'm going to do part 3. Here's a good one that I think I can get done pretty quickly. Do I stretch before or after working out? I get a lot of people ask me that. It depends on what you mean by stretch. And it depends on why you want to do it. And shit, that opens up a whole other can of something. But in terms of just what you want to do throughout, when you walk into the gym, there's a couple different reasons and mentalities as to why you would want to order something a certain way. And again, that's going to depend on your goals. In general, the way that I would throw together the order for any sort of, like, when you walk through the gym door and you're trying to be as efficient with your time as possible, is you always want to start with some sort of generalized warm up, just to get the heart rate up, to get blood flowing to the musculature. Um, did I say heart rate already? I'm starting to lose it. Talking for half an hour straight about this stuff is taxing sometimes. Usually it's just like 5 minute answer about one of these questions, but I'm trying to go into as much detail as I can. General warm up. Sometimes if you need to, some extra mobility drills. I tend to favor like warm up sets because you do want to warm up with the movement that you're performing, right? Like runners warm up by running. So if you're going to lift, you want to do a couple warm up sets where if you're squatting, if you're squatting 315, you got to do a couple warm up sets with, just the bar and like a plate on each side and 2 plates on each side, because you're warming up for the movement. You don't just want to slap on 315 and do 3 sets of 10 and call it a day. You got to do a couple sets beforehand, and that's going to warm up all of the joints and musculature and everything that's going to be utilized when you're doing that. With the exception that I do feel like as I've gotten more into it that, yeah, I'm still doing all the warm-up sets and stuff, but I do a lot of mobility drills and stuff before I do any lifting. One, just to deal with soreness. Two, I do have like some issues with like I have a shoulder problem, and I want to make sure that I'm hitting proper squat depth and stuff like that. So I'm doing a couple drills here and there. So general warm-up, mobility work, lifting, and then you can do like whatever cardio you want, cardio conditioning, what have you, and then do any static stretching afterwards, if you feel like you need it and if it's going to benefit you. And of course there's some exceptions to the rule where maybe you would want to do a static stretch before doing a certain lift if you feel like that's assisting in some way. There have been studies done on stretching before any form of exercise that say that it does increase your risk of injury, but at the same time it's within a certain time frame and it's within a certain like measured, I think they do it with runners for instance, and you don't want to lose muscle elasticity and stuff like that. But also at the same time there might be reasons as to why you would do it. I want to say Olympic lifters, people who do like snatches and clean and jerks and stuff like that with real heavy weight. I think in order to like hit proper depth for squatting, that I believe that they stretch before. I've never done Olympic lifting. This is stuff that I've heard people say, but they do like hip girdle stretches and stuff like that before lifting, because they want to make sure that they're hitting proper depth and that they have the flexibility, because it's probably the same for gymnasts. You see gymnasts stretching all the time. Like, none of these things apply 100% to everything, but I think if you have the basic formula of like these are the things you should do in this order, like you don't want to do cardio before lifting because you don't want to wear yourself out by running a bunch and then get underneath a heavy bar and squat 225 for however many reps, because you don't want to F your ass up. Also, at the same time, I don't think if you're like a bodybuilder, I think sometimes bodybuilders do cardio before they lift because it's just extra blood flow, and then if they're not lifting as heavy of weights and they're doing more isolated type movements, like, I don't know, these are things that there's always the rule and then the exception to the rule and then the exception to the exception to the rule. But for basic population, I would go general warm-up, mobility drills, lifting, cardio, stretching. I would order it that way, and then if you have to make changes to that for some specific reason or another, then you can, but at least you're sort of informed on why you're doing it that way, as opposed to doing it incorrectly, hurting yourself, and then, not knowing why you hurt yourself, if that makes sense. I I don't know, I don't have any feedback for someone to go, yeah, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, which is the hard thing about making the videos. I just have to put this out there, and then someone in the comment section will call me some sort of slur and whatever. But that's 30 minutes, so that's part 2. There's gonna have to be a part 3. So, because I got a lot more questions, and I think I only answered 3. So, thanks for watching, and like, comment, subscribe, do whatever. I don't care.